So, what is woke? How is it used? And how am I going to deal with this mess? Find out more if you keep watching. And why didn't I mute my phone? Because I didn't expect it to actually do anything. Let me take care of that before we get into it, or just smother it with a pillow. So, we're off to the start. We're doing what is woke. And now, might as well just go into it. Wanted to go through a whole complicated details with all this fun stuff, but I thought I would start with a little bit of pillar of garbage, a sort of leftist perspective on what all this woke stuff is, with my little edit here as soon as it pops up on stream. So here we have it. Let's go with what is woke.
There is a direct causal link between the fringe conspiracy theory and the modern mainstream anti-SJW, anti-woke discourse. And shockingly, everyone's favorite lobster boy, Blorben Bleeberson, played a big role here. The disgraced ex-professor cited the rapid
the disgrace ex-professor and psychologist. Okay. I'm putting these up on screen. Just better to beat to the punch. Keep this in mind. I'm pointing this out here. There's going to be a claim about cultural Marxism made by Pillar of Garbage here about him sort of making cultural Marxism spread like wildfire. Here's the two instances in the full video of the Toronto thing on Bill C-16, Marxism 1 point.
academic spread of cultural Marxism while protesting against the Canadian
Radical
Anti-Discrimination Bill, which shot him to online fame. This isn't to say that the online alt-right were clueless about this beforehand.
I might have missed a few by, mistranslation by it, but this was the two instance in this hour and 30 minute, which was one of the oldest ones I could find.
A lot of these dopes had seen the idea themselves by this point, in whatever online space Jeterson did. But in terms of your average Joe hearing about the leftist plot to
Let me read this. Known as postmodernism with a kind of neo-Marxist and modernism.
infiltrate institutions and brainwash via media, we can thank Meat Sweats over here for a lot of that. By the by, it ought to go without saying that the universities aren't being taken over by Marxist infiltrators, but it is probably worth making that point explicitly. As Matthew Sharp writes in an article for The Conversation, quantitative research bears out the idea that cultural Marxism is indeed a post-factual dog whistle, and an intellectual confusion masquerading as higher insight.
And this is the person who wrote the article that Pillar of Garbage just went into. You might not be able to see it if you're not looking closely enough. It says critical theory. So areas of expertise. There's a lot, but the one here is critical theory. And pretty much the Marxist conspiracy theory is that it's critical theory that's sort of spreading this. This is sort of like having a pretty much the tobacco company be like, yeah, the people who are criticizing us for giving people cancer and health risk, they're wrong about that. That's just a conspiracy. Maybe that's being a little unfair, but I just don't think someone who lists critical theory in his area of expertise should be talking about cultural Marxism being a dog whistle of any type. Now, here's part of the story. And I could have put this together a little bit better, but the term cultural Marxism moved into the mainstream media around 2016 when psychiatrist Jordan Peterson was protesting a Canadian bill prohibiting the discrimination based on gender. Peterson blamed cultural Marxism phenomenon for the movement of respecting gender neutral pronouns, which in his view undermined freedom of speech. No, Jordan Peterson had concerns about how the sort of bill would actually be used. It's a lot more complex than that. So the fact that he's saying cultural Marxism was spread by Jordan Peterson is sort of false. As I said, maybe he would make the argument his sort of neo post um postmodernism with neo-Marxist aspects is the same as cultural Marxism, but 7 degrees of separation are quite a weird thing. Okay, yeah. The neo-Marxist, he brings this up. So, moving the goalposts to the neo-Marxists, which Jordan Peterson has said a lot. Frankfurt School of Social Research, something that his credit said that he would have actually probably studied these cultural theorists. Himself would be included in this. And it's almost a rewrite of history. The Wikipedia seems like it changed cultural Marxism into a conspiracy theory. I believe it's September of 2020. Wonder what that is. I can't be sure of that. You can go into Wikipedia and check for the changes yourself and use the Wayback Machine, but not here to make that argument. So I'm moving on to this next one. And the evidence POG sort of use post last 4 decades have seen relative decline of Marxists through academia. Its influence have been superseded by post-structuralists or postmodernist thinkers, blah, blah, blah. Postmodernists. Post-structuralism is partially indebted to thinkers of the conservative revolution led by Nietzsche and Hegel, where Marxism is built on the hope for reason, revolution, and social progress. Post-structuralism thinkers roundly reject such optimistic grand narratives. And he is correct, but he's not talking about Marxism. He's talking about critical theory, which was trying to see the failures of Marxism and use both postmodern thinking, like post-structuralism, would actually employ in the schools. They're more about deconstruction and understanding mainly literature and culture and not really making any prescriptions where critical theory, sorry. Let's not go into the offshoots just yet. Just critical theory at its base isn't quite the same way. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm going over what is woke from a sort of historical perspective here. And I'm starting with Pillar of Garbage, sort of a garbage video, at least in part. So post-structuralists are preoccupied as conservative news columnism. Post-structuralism is not a conservative revolution. Look at some of the people he brings up for this. I think one of them, well, I think Julia Butler, definitely a name that comes up. Third wave feminist, I think, or second wave feminism. None of these people were conservative at all. So this sort of falls apart. He's trying to make this the post-structuralism is primarily indebted to thinkers of European conservative revolution. This is just so dishonest in many ways.
The first thing one likely notices about post-structuralism is that, as with postmodernism...
Here's another leftist. I'd like to use actual people on the left to sort of test my ideas. This is talking about Structuralist. So let's see if it sounds conservative at all.
Or post-colonialism, the term itself implies a relationship with something called structuralism. Himself has been fairly open about borrowing certain conventions from The Shining, Halloween, and North by Northwest. Structuralism foregrounds the presence of such shared conventions and tropes across multiple texts in order to gain a better understanding of the language of individual cultural forms and perhaps human culture in its entirety. Neither narrative structure nor genre, however, are natural phenomena. Both are human creations, and so too is language itself. Structuralist analysis is generally aware of this fact, yet mostly decides not to question it too much. It holds that language, or again, the language of film or literature.
Yes, it's from my research, and it was interesting looking into post-structuralism, how it's sort of offshoot. Has absolutely no prescriptions. It's just a merely descriptive breakdown, like critical theory, but without that last step of trying to replace that grand narrative it's breaking down into something like critical race theory, queer theory, post-colonism. There's a lot of them out there. I don't see how this is a conservative idea. Breaking things down is very anti conservative from what I know of conservatism,
etc., is all we have. So we're best off just compiling the best understanding of it we can. Post-structuralism, however, does go that step further in encouraging us to consider whether the fact that language is a human creation might mean that, like any other human invention, it might have certain flaws and biases. It encourages us to ask whether language, and again other forms of communication, might sometimes fail us and communicate something altogether different than what we initially intended. Furthermore, it asks us to consider whether those languages might be subject to many of the same ideological biases of, for example, gender, race, and class as other.
But it does fall along the same lines as critical theory. Okay? It seems almost to be just without that extra step. It's like critical theory without the extra step. And yeah, you can make the argument that woke is really just post-structuralism, but really doesn't change how different it is from critical theory at its core. One's used more culturally, and one's used more politically to make social change. So, in culture, woke definitely has more characteristics of post-structuralism. And politics, it has more characteristics of the offshoots of critical theory, like critical race theory, feminist intersectional theory, and of course, queer theory, the most prevalent one nowadays.
Other human institution.
So, point of all that is just to say, this seems like total and utter BS. Again, this is someone credited as someone who studies critical theory. So you expect someone who has expertise in critical theory will be honest about the truth of critical theory? I don't think I do.
Form modern reactionary culture, which then metastasized in the post-Last Jedi culture war to become the alt-right pipeline we know today. The point you should take away from this potted history...
Yeah, he just jumps straight to that. And there's a good reason I'm highlighting this. So, yeah, critical theory, approach to humanities and social philosophy that focuses on blah, 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 rooted in sociology and literary criticism, very much like post-structuralism, argues, again, social problems, society structure, cultural assumptions, blah, blah, blah. Critical theory is a school of thought practiced by the Frankfurt School, whole bunch of names. Here's the big thing. Philosophical approaches within this broader definition includes feminism, critical race theory. What's that? Post-structuralism. That sort of makes that article even more bullshit. And I'm pretty sure Wikipedia has a left-leaning bias. So, pillar of garbage. And whoever wrote that article, Mark Sharp, I think, queer theory and post-colonialism is pretty much just a circular logic of bullshit here.
History, though, is that the roots of the so-called anti-woke movement trace fairly directly back to a fringe far-right conspiracy theory, itself playing on fascist propaganda, swapping out one evil, hated, civilization-weakening group for another. None of this is to say that nobody working on these projects is making creative.
And look at this cultural Marxism conspiracy theory, because when you go to cultural Marxism, it directs you here now. In 2015, that was not the case, but I didn't want to get into the semantics of anti Semitism and sort of the rewriting of history. None of this stuff about cultural Marxism was sort of the Frankfurt School was sort of worried about Nazism. I think in the original thing, which I maybe should have include it, but I didn't want to get bogged down. The point is revisionary history and sort of bullshit arguments off of someone who doesn't look into articles is faulty logic. Plain and simple there. Saying cultural Marxism is something Jordan Peterson started seems a little bullshit. You can make the argument with postmodernism with neo-Marxist characteristics as he does do, but still different things. But poison the well of Jordan Peterson and anyone who sort of has arguments similar to this. But you know what?
Creative choices influenced by their personal progressive beliefs, whether that be writing a story that very consciously gives female characters agency, or pitching a Black Panther sequel that goes beyond who's gonna become the next cool bulletproof high-tech hero and becomes a post-colonial piece about the way hegemonic dominance is upheld mentally.
Yeah. So it's the personal, individual choice to include a derivative of critical theory within. Developing critical theory, blah, blah, blah. It's hiding the ball, maybe a Maud and Bailey, trying to obscure what woke means, what is significance, and sort of its connection to alt-right. When you get down to the brass tacks of the matter, it's all rooted from technically a critique of Marxism, which failed, and trying to recreate it to let leftists be able to use this sort of failed system that keeps on failing over and over again. But let me not judge it too harshly.
In how it forces other states to play their game on their terms, as well as simply militarily. Of course.
Okay. I already had a What is Woke folder from a while ago, and this is what was in it before I started this. Overwhelming majority. No, let me not do a Stitch voice. Overwhelming majority of people have no clue what wokeness is, what this current direction of left is going, and what gives woke strength is the ability to hide and pretend it's just a continuation of liberal civil rights, when in reality it's a refutation of it. And that's absolutely correct. Everything about woke, whether you want to consider it Marxism, critical theory, just postmodernism, it's a critique of liberalism. And it's right in the beginning of the main CRT book. And critical race theory, the key writings that form the movement. Don't worry about reading that. I have a abstract of that. The aspect of our work which is most markedly distinguished from its conventional liberal and conservative legal scholarship about race and inequality is a deep dissatisfaction with traditional civil rights discourse. So basically, more definitely not the idea of Martin Luther King, at least espoused in his famous I Have a Dream speech, but more Black separatist discourse that sort of wants to overthrow and get all they can. Power games is how it's played. And maybe I shouldn't have included this, or maybe kept it on the stream longer. Okay, and this is correct. I double checked it. For a clear example of how CRT is illiberal, read Derek Bell, someone they try to be like, oh, is he really the founder of critical race theory? Blah, blah, blah. You know, hiding the ball and pretend obfuscation. Race realism explicitly says we should abandon equality and integration. And I don't want to go through all that other stuff, but you can look it up for yourself.
Most of the time with these arguments, both sides come to the table already with a preconceived definition of whatever it is they're arguing.
And I wanted to
explains this to the
one
other.
of
They
his
simply
videos
project
in
their
here.
definition onto their opponent.
So let's try to alleviate some of that by defining what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yep. Define woke. This is how it is in Wikipedia. Remember, this is probably going to be biased from a left-wing perspective. Okay, so definitely comes from the left wing. Get all that in there. Used by African Americans. Of course, BML used it. Black Twitter. Okay. No matter what you think of BML, this might be a little, shorthand for identity politics is the important part. Social justice is a little hard to fight against since it's so nebulous in terminology. White privilege, the progressive stack, and it's all up there. And this actually is a good framing of all this stuff. So, identity politics. Definitely race, nationality, gender, sexual orientation, caste, social class, depending on identity politics. Not much here. I'm just putting in for the reference. There is a lot here. Race, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, blah, blah, blah. Just want to have all this out there. Criticism of identity politics generally comes from the center right or the far. Criticism of identity politics generally comes from either the center right or the far left. That doesn't even seem right. The far left, it would be the more center left and center right who would have criticism. This seems flawed at hand. Many socialists and idealistic Marxists have deeply criticized. This Wikipedia article is freaking. This is just. I didn't actually read this part when I screen capped it. Or maybe I thought it meant something different. Deeply criticized identity politics for its divisive nature and claiming it forms identity that can undermine proletariat. Okay, maybe pure Marxists. Okay, maybe pure Marxists has issues with identity politics. Okay. But this is still the far left. You have BML people, you have queer theorists who thinks identity comes first. It's a fight over the sort of focus of identity, because poor people could be considered a class. The proletariat and the bourgeoisie is the focus. I guess they don't consider it identity or part of identity politics. I think that would fit under social background, caste, or social class. So if you put that in, this sort of undermines everything here. Claiming inherent collectivist prejudice, right-wing critics. Contrast to universalism of liberalism or Marxist perspective. Okay, it sort of almost conflates these two, but it also separates them, which is a good thing. But this just seems odd. I guess technically maybe they can get away with that. Yeah. Whew. That seems to be really off base here. Fraser argued identity construct is more than affirmative. Leftist. Okay, and we have the feminism here. So, yep. Feminism movement. I think I have several here just because feminism is quite an interesting thing to go down the history of it. Yeah, feminist theory from the start, first wave feminism, the right to vote, and other issues like that. You started with just like the right to vote, and then you come down the line, first wave feminism, reform, democratic. Over time, that developed socialistic and Marxism based on the class struggle theory, radical feminism, second wave feminism, which is where elimination of the patriarchy, liberalism, society, radical, some big school thought of feminist thoughts. Here's the gender critical feminism. Maybe I should have spent more time, but I'm just filling up the time of this video. Maybe should have done this in a different way. Critical theory. Coming back to this now. See,
what does
theory.
The Black Lives Matter organization actually stand for? To find out, look no further than their leaders.
And I have to point out one thing now. Although a product of modernism, I think that's a little bit weird. And to liberate human beings from the circumstances to enslave them, maybe that's how they frame it. But although a product of modernism, although many of the progenitors of critical theory were skeptical of postmodernism, critical theory is one of the major components. Pretty much they use a lot of postmodern thought to break things down before they try to replace the grand narrative that they construct the status quo with their own grand narrative, which tends to be sort of rooted in the subjective viewpoint of things.
What does the Black Lives Matter organization actually stand for? To find out, look no further than their leaders. Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and Patrisse Cullors. Here's Cullors in a revealing 2015 interview.
We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
Visit the Black Lives Matter website and read the list of demands to get a sense of how deep a transformation they seek.
I have to say, don't mind the framing. Okay. Just listen to what they actually say. Because, they're going to poison the well. Where did you get this information? I don't care where I got this information from. That clip is all over. This also included a small clip about a certain section. Maybe not all of it's bad, but this part definitely sounds a little off here.
One of those demands proclaims, quote, "We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another."
Whenever they don't pander.
Okay, on to the more cultural aspect and cultural criticism of there. I already proved that Pillar of Garbage was pretty much garbage with all his coverage of wokeism or any of this. Let's hit the other side. This isn't going to be so broad scale. Might take a few shots. I'll try to keep it at a limit for heels versus babyface. I like what he says here, but it sort of contradicts what he's said in the past. And the critical drinker definitely does have a good stance on this. It's just weird with the this is for the into the pandaverse and about wokeness. And these are two of the worst people he could have brought on. I don't know about Jedi Brooks though. He seemed cool. I'm not just saying that because he's a black man.
Those things tend to do the best, both commercially and critically. A good example would be, in terms of movies, Top Gun Maverick, Spider-Man No Way Home, Elden Ring, for example.
And this is just so stupid from Naman, okay? Even if you like the pandering and what they were doing with Spider-Man No Way Home, this is still pandering the 3 Spider-Men together. It's just, it still fits the qualification of pandering. So I just don't respect this guy. Okay. And you're about to see also why.
Right? You ever played that? There's no politics in that game. You just buy it, play it, you're good.
Yeah. No politics, but still pandering. Wokeism would be pandering using a sort of political viewpoint. Something like No Way Home is pandering to sort of the fandom. And it was awesome to see. I'm not criticizing that sort of epic section there. Definitely gave me the feels seeing the 3 Spider-Mans together, but it is fan service and it is pandering. So, yes, wokeness is pandering to people's. And frankly, I have my own particular theories that because of identity politics and what people call wokeness, there's a lot of weird identities out there. All of Miss Sparkles. Yes. My personal theory, don't take this with a grain of salt. People like furries, femboys, a lot of people who are gamers, even to a certain extent, is an identity that people are adopted because no one really wants to be. I even believe the trans craze and the sort of queer movement with a gender binary is a byproduct of identity politics and no one wanting to identify as a cis white man. So if you're a cis white man and you want to be accepted, you find identity. You're not a white man, you're a furry, or you're non-binary, or something else. As I said, take that with a grain of salt, but I still think it has some merits that I wanted to bring up here.
So I feel like what we're going to see more so, we're going to see people just, as long as they don't pander,
2 people
those
try
things are
to
going to do
sort
the
of
best, I think,
interrupt him,
commercially, and then
just
eventually
goes
the market
on.
will understand. And after all, I also think it's fair to compare Starfield's gameplay to something like Destiny 2. Something like Destiny 2.
Yeah,
On
sorry.
the surface,
I had to
Starfield
clip
just
this
lets you
out
shoot
to sort of
guns. You
make
don't
fun of
have
him.
any cool
This is
space
Intamon,
powers. You don't have any
king
cool
of woke
space powers.
clickbait.
Do we have powers? Is what? You have power?
I have 12,000 likes, and nobody called him out on his clear bullshit. This man just lied to all of his audience, and they ate.
He has a echo chamber. You have to accept the bad side. But I will say, identity politics, wokeism almost seems to be a way to create a reactionary movement that overcompensates and makes idiots like this into targets. And I'm glad for the most part, the gaming community did not go along with people like Az or Inamon, however the fuck you say his name. I'm glad they're not. I really wish it wouldn't have pushed them sort of in a leftist perspective, because that's frankly what I saw with someone freaking the Ackman's dumbass. I'm not advocating for Ackman's position. Him bringing Vosh into this and sort of displaying him as smarter than Az is bad tactically. Bad for, but you have the cultural woke sort of taking priority, or should I say anti-woke in this case, being a case where the Ackman, and I'm not advocating for Ackman's idiocy. You should see his definition of woke. It's like a child who downed too many painkillers and just a selfish little brat, which frankly, Ackman has proven time and time again that's his MO. But he still has a lot of subs and a lot of influence. So how do you push back against the brain deads of the anti-wokes and sort of not fall into the brain dead camp of someone as dumb as the Ackman? I don't know. I tried to distinguish myself, but I don't have much of a platform, so we'll see how that goes.
Ate it up. They just took his word for it. Actually, Frit, he said on the surface. Not even on the surface, okay? This man clearly did not watch the Starfield Direct or watch a single one of the trailers because we knew the game had space powers before it even came out. Surface, we already
Yeah,
knew
sorry for
this
anyone
would be in
watching
the
this.
game.
Let me indulge
And
this
before you
man a
try to
little bit.
grasp at that other
This is
straw,
funny.
I'm gonna have to stop you. I know what you're thinking. Well, he said cool space powers, so checkmate. Because what's cool is subjective, and he feels like there was no cool powers in Starfield, then he's...
I'm not going to argue with you, Miss Sparkles. Definitely a good point. And as his rant was funny, at least, okay? I think he pushed a little bit too hard back, and his sort of pushback seemed defensive. Best thing Az can do is move on, and with what he said in this, have a more sensible approach from now on. He went viral. Take the hit. People make fun of him. He got some subs. Not criticizing Az too much. I hope he moves forward from this and doesn't make too much of an ass, because you can have a few moments like that. And he does have a bias, but he also has friends like the Critical Drinker and even Mauler to a certain extent who can help him out with that.
Well within his rights to say that. Oh boy. Trust me, this is not the hill you want to die on. Roll the clip!
If you compare Starfield to other AAA games like Destiny, the gameplay is just pathetically simple and boring. In Destiny, I can weave the fabrics of reality as a titan and suspend my enemy.
Oh, yeah.
In the right direction, but can we get back to the writing quality? And it's part of the reason on my channel I'd like to say it strategically, but I might have just like forgot to mention it this whole time. But I never used the word woke. I don't think I've ever done it on my channel because I feel like it's not going to age well. Everyone has their own definition of the word woke. So let's just talk about the shit writing and what it's doing to the storytelling, and then you can kind of go from there.
Well, I'd say part of the problem, to throw a grenade into this conversation, is there's a big disagreement on which things are and which things are not pandering. For
yeah, it's important to really get into the sort of nitty gritty of that. And yeah, Jedi Brooks is right. From a political perspective, you don't want wokeness in games. You're afraid it's going to influence, even subconsciously, children, especially if it's marketed to a demographic. There's some issues that I have, like what Mauler's going to bring up. He's going to bring up the whole mixed gender bathrooms of the Dead Space remake. There's also other little things that I don't think are woke that's been called that. Like bringing back Synthetic Man, my coverage of him, even if BMO wants to say I'm sounding like him. Okay, moving on from that. Yes, him talking about a freaking trans flag and a hat for time, or the trans flag. See, it has all these anti-woke people looking for anything. But fundamentally, it's really the story that you need to look at to see if something is pushing a sort of a woke agenda, so to speak, more of identity politics. If they break down sort of a character, there's definitely an argument if you're breaking down the character Peter Parker, making him seem crappy in comparison to Miles Morales, as the discourse around the new Spider-Man game is. And everyone's just putting that aside to sort of, I don't know why everyone's steel manning when the game is both has that aspect, at least to a small extent. You can argue that's not as bad as people are making out to be, the anti-woke people. But it definitely is something. Definitely worse than just having a trans flag. And as much as I hate to say it, the sort of example everyone was memeing on for seeing red, the one like guy in the queer coding and the tampons, that was just cringe. I wouldn't call that woke. Definitely a wokeism, but that was just pure stupidity that everyone just, hopefully they didn't take too seriously. They just laughed at the stupidity of that.
Example be, as far as I'm concerned, embarrassing approach to Dead Space, the remake, where everyone, like half the fucking internet was talking about whether or not a particular woman was hot enough compared to like the stellar mechanical upgrade the game had, as well as the graphics, the atmosphere. Yeah. What a glorious remake of an awesome game. And like a lot of the conversation was completely ruined by people who were like, yeah, but what bathrooms did they have in the game? Which I think is
gives a fuck. Oh God, it's insanity. It's insane. I've never heard a single thing about the gameplay on that game. Like not
that
one
was
thing.
That was legit one of the things that prompted me to make a video on like my second channel, like just what is woke.
Okay, we're about to get into it. Sort of dissect the Critical Drinker. Overall, I like this video by the Critical Drinker. Think it might have a few holes in it, maybe more tactical shortcomings of it that I am not copacetic with, but it's not about his intent, which I believe is really solid and stellarly done.
Because I'm kind of like you. I never use the word in my reviews. It's a word that I try to avoid in my own reviews as much as possible, because just like racism and sexism, it's been overused so much over the past few years that it's basically lost all meaning and relevance. Like every piece of online discourse about a new movie, TV show, or video game inevitably devolves into whether or not it's woke, without really understanding what that word even means and how to measure it.
Yes. I went over earlier about the more rooted political message of wokeism. Now, what pillar of garbage, at least to the article person, post-structuralism definitely seems more like a tool that someone in film school would have learned to sort of break down something, because it's a more literary version, a more cultural. He's right. It's focused on the cultural, but it's also descended from critical theory, period. So it's sort of like a modern Bailey or hide the ball by saying it's not critical theory, it's post-structuralism. Just because it has a very slight deviation from it, does it really make it much different? My opinion about that, no. Just like in the end, what's the difference between critical race theory, queer theory, feminism nowadays? Well, feminism is a whole different beast. You have the TERFs and a whole bunch of other stuff on that angle, but they all use the same ideology to sort of root their idea, break down, find whatever they can to break down, get whatever power they can in whatever positions they can, take whatever positions they get and make good use of it. Unfortunately, power corrupts completely. You had the BML, the founders, sort of making that money and running. You had the example of Ibrahim Kendi. Oh, Ibrahim Kendi. Yeah, I think Ibrahim Kendi. I could be thinking wrong person who pretty much wasted his funding he got from BML and the sort of shit of 2020. And on the other side of things, you have other issues involved here. But when it comes to the cultural side, yeah, it is a slightly different beast, but understanding critical theory and how that power corrupts and how they give power to those who also believe in their sort of power structures. Because the praxis of critical theory, you don't want to put someone who doesn't believe what you want in positions of power, even if they're not as capable as other people. It's ideology over talent, the cause instead of capitalism.
So first up, how do we begin to define it? Well, it kind of depends who you ask. If you ask someone on the progressive end of the political spectrum, they'll probably tell you that being woke means demonstrating a greater awareness of the...
And this is where the distinction, progressivism. You have, again, hiding the ball, progressive. You have someone like Destiny who will accept certain notions. He's still rather a bit of a pain and will still do it, but he still doesn't play by the identity politics. He doesn't want to deal with some of the more lamer cultural aspects. He's more focused on the political angle. And you also have other progressives who, free Palestine and, they did nothing wrong. Let me not get too political here, but yeah. Remember, progressivism is definitely a sort of tainted thing that could be leftist, or it could be a little bit diluted liberals. Yeah. But that doesn't mean all liberals will follow along with some of this stuff. Just some of those liberals are fine enough with the freedom and they won't infringe on anyone. Liberalism has its flaws, and it's probably the biggest one. Live and let live philosophy there.
The systematic injustices, oppression, and inequality of modern society, and making some effort to pass that awareness on to the audience. It's about educating people, helping them to broaden their minds and see the world from a different perspective, giving more visibility to groups that didn't get a fair shot in the past, and inspiring a greater sense of compassion and acceptance of people who happen to look or think different from you.
This is a very good faith reading on the subject matter of how the people on the so-called woke side, progressive side, sort of think about things. So I can approve of that.
On the other hand, if you ask someone on the opposite side, they'll tell you that it's a divisive and destructive ideology that aggressively pushes hardcore left-wing political agendas into all aspects of entertainment, demonizing anyone who happens to be straight, white, and male, undermining Western cultural values, hijacking and destroying long-established characters and franchises, and generally chipping away at the foundation.
This is, yeah, you could say this is a generous reading, but frankly, this is missing the mark, in my personal opinion. Definitely, they would, a lot of people, but there's a lot of people who are against wokeness in both politics and in media who has a completely different perspective on this. See, this is why usually when there is a third neutral position, I'll advocate for it. Even the they, them pronouns, I will advocate the shit out of it. You want to know why? Because it sort of cuts off the legs of people who want to be difficult about it. Yes. Sex, gender, typically binary. In reality, it's bimodal. There are some people who fall out of that, but they're generally, let's be generous and say, aberrant oddities. Okay. Very small population of that mid-sex population, like hermaphrodites and other people with chromosomal issues, like biological males who pretty much are really attractive women, but chromosomally, they are men. Maybe with an extra bit, I think. Sorry, biology isn't my strong suit, but there is that mid-sex category. The reason for having it. Also to cut off the legs of people who want xeno pronouns. Because we gave you the other category if you don't want to be male or female. So don't call us bigots. You want to call yourself an animal? Fine. I'll call you a weirdo.
Of everything that our culture is built on. So basically, you've got two wildly conflicting views of the same thing, colored by the perspectives of the people involved. And with that being the case, is it even possible to be objective about something so divisive and contentious? Well, yes, but I think this is where we have to apply a bit of something that's generally lacking in modern online discussions: nuance.
Yeah, I disagree. This is why I'm making the stream, to sort of go over the history of wokeness. Isn't advocating for the anti-woke people. Trust me, I'll hit back on the downsides of that in a bit. But yes, the history of it is divisive to sort of get the normies and people not really understanding what they're sort of advocating for, to not see the divisive nature of actual identity politics. But it's a useful tool for separating the society, separating the fan base, breakdown of society. I wouldn't go that far. Okay. Definitely, I'm fine with it because I would be fine with it if we were willing to have more nuanced discussions about these sort of issues here. But frankly, seems like the more time goes on, the more people get isolated, both politically and culturally. And that is a big mistake. Frankly, there need to be more middle ground people to say, I see your perspective, but this is why I disagree with this. And I see your perspective, and this is why I disagree with this. I mean, Critical Drinker here is trying to take a nuanced look at it, but there are objective facts that sort of led to this, and some distortion of the truth.
See, looking at this thing from a neutral perspective, I think most sensible, level-headed people would probably accept two things.
Yeah, most sensible, level-headed people, but how many of them are out there in the world? And you also have to consider the optics and the critical drinker. As YMS pointed out rather roughly, probably not to the greatest degree. Probably have a discussion coming up in a few weeks about that. So I don't want to touch on too much of that. I'll be trying to be the neutral party for a YMS fan and a EFAP fan, or particularly a Mueller fan. Sort of hash that out of the fandoms there.
1. Raising awareness of social, cultural, and environmental issues isn't a bad thing. Neither is encouraging people to look at the world from different perspectives or given historically underrepresented groups.
I absolutely agree. But you still have to sort of have that caveat of you need to root certain things in objective facts, objective things. So we have a shared language. Translation, okay? Because the political divide is wide. And even among both the right, left, and even the center, there is a massive camps forming with different conflicts with each other. You know, it can't just be, why can't we all just get along? And that is a little sad.
Or problems a bit more visibility and attention, or trying to move beyond tired and damaging old stereotypes. 2. Pushing all of this stuff too hard, too aggressively, or with ill intentions is having a damaging effect on modern entertainment. Instead of encouraging people to broaden their minds and consider new perspectives, it's basically lecturing and browbeating them into thinking the way the creators want them to think.
Not necessarily. As I said, I have a severe criticism against the critical drinker and his Barbie take. I think that sets the wrong tone in that he completely misunderstands. But I do understand why he misunderstands it. That's an excellent example of postmodern filmmaking. I don't even think calling it woke is actually accurate, because woke, if you lay it out from a more critical theorist thing, yes, it uses the themes of feminism and also filmmaking, which only certain people seem to pick up on, at least consciously, and other people might pick up on it subconsciously. It sort of does a breakdown, but doesn't try. Some people say that it replaces, it tries to have a grand narrative, but frankly, I disagree. It sort of leaves that question to the viewer's perspective. And I can understand people having a problem with that perspective. It is postmodern. It's like asking a very thought-provoking question, but not actually give an answer when someone asks, so what's the answer? And they just tell you to think about it. That's something like postmodernism would aim for in its purest form. But critical theory is sort of a beast of its own, and so is post-structuralism and all this wokeness. It's hard to pin down. So obfuscation often happens within the discussions. I agree overall. The term woke shouldn't be used. Maybe occasional clickbait and as a meme, but seriously, it complicates discussions between people.
Replacing one form of arrogant narrow-mindedness with a different one. Instead of elevating marginalized groups, it's dragging down, insulting, and demonizing anyone else, and usually trying to lazily pander to the groups themselves with unimaginative, tokenized attempts at representation.
Yep, we'll agree. Writers, because of the power structure, you want the thought process, the ideology, or at least someone you can control to actually be in the positions, the writers, directors, the focus on having experts is also something that is very significant to know. As I brought up with the Wikipedia, they definitely have a left-leaning bias. Those who control what's being done on Wikipedia will have a significant impact on a majority of the population who really isn't concerned with wokeness at all. They just want a stable economy and good entertainment. And, pandering gets to a lot of people. As simple as that. But when you prioritize people loyal to the cause, it's definitely going to take a hit in the quality. And I hope anyone from the conservative perspective or even the centrist perspective can keep that in mind if they want to go into entertainment, sort of like the Daily Wire. They're just going to create a parallel economy that has all the same shortcomings, just on the other side.
Instead of creating great stories and characters with high-minded ideas cleverly woven into the narrative, it's given us little more than socio-political indoctrination with a thin veneer of entertainment grudgingly wrapped around it. The point I'm making here is that incorporating progressive themes and ideas into entertainment is no different than incorporating traditional conservative themes and ideas. They're both just perspectives that the audience is invited to consider. But for me, the tipping point comes when those themes and ideas to be explored turn into messages to be broadcast. That's where they start to undermine the integrity.
Well, media is the message. As much as I advocate for new media theory, it's definitely a very postmodern idea. It's sort of like post-structuralism, just trying to break down and understanding the messaging. And it really has no inherent replacement for the grand narrative. It's just about understanding. So, to the credit again, post-structuralism seems to be something way more tuned with a slight adjacence. And you can use the idea of critical theory to a certain extent, but to use sort of that sort of thought process of finding all the weaknesses and not any of the strengths of the media out there is also sort of playing in to the same thing. It's fighting fire with fire. Just a pure deconstruction, trying to deconstruct it. Reconstruction is where I think people can have their advantage. Like my criticism Mahler from last stream, I haphazardly threw out there. Better form tonight. Not really a morning person. You want to replace it with alternatives, or at least come up with the understanding of where the flaws went and the possible reasons why it didn't achieve what it needed to. But that's a different matter altogether.
Of the story and characters, making them behave in ways that don't feel natural, believable, or consistent with what we know about them.
Yes, and there's also people's personal bias that will take into account. Like, there's a lot of disagreements I have with other people on the characterizations. Seems like Mueller, in part, wants to see good characterizations, good interaction between everyone. But there are going to be unsociable people who it will be within their character to not really emote too much. Now, using characters like that in media might just be something you want to avoid for a lot of people, but it's the not for you thing. Everything has its place.
Instead of interesting concepts to be explored, what you end up with are a series of restrictive and suffocating rules that intrude in almost every aspect of the narrative.
Yes, I will agree. The checklist. The checklist in award programs are getting insane. You take a look at the BAFTA, even the Golden Globes now. You need to have a certain quota or checklist of certain people to even qualify for that. Even in freaking something, a personal gripe of mine is the freaking grip that this sort of ideology happens in books. I brought up the power structure of the leftists tends to go for the powerful roles. They tend to replace. They will not replace us, ironically enough. They are trying to replace the authorities. brought up the sort of editors of Wikipedia. You can find out some people talking about that online. I've seen a few videos of that. Not really a place for that. You have the Token Society, who's sort of enabling Amazon Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, to have that seal of approval. You should take a look at their expert on Lord of the Rings and what they say, how Tolkien's would be all for this inclusive stuff. And you have the Wheel of Time. They had someone on the list, Brandon Sanderson, who helped finish up the series in that case. But they went with some other woman as their Wheel of Time expert. And you see what her interpretation. She's like, oh, yeah, Wheel of Time Amazon does is completely, would be totally the greatest adaptation. And that is just total and utter bullshit masking as expertise. You hire the scientists, you hire the experts, and no matter what anyone has to say, trust the experts. Seems to be the buzzword wherever you go. The authorities of science fiction writing, authorities of acting in Hollywood. It happens everywhere. And as a knockback effort, you'll have those who disagree with them, who tries to take the reins, take control, implement gatekeeping themselves. It's just a power struggle that just pushes the pendulum back and forth. You need to come to a sort of neutral stance, and you need to have a more balanced place where we want both politics and media to sort of settle at. I mean, maybe that's just me and my personal centrist perspective on it. I would rather have a neutral, because you can go a little left, you can go a little right with that. Some people will say it's fascism on one side and communism on the other side, but it's better than the extremes of that pendulum swinging back and forth.
And it's usually a sign that the writers care more about getting their political ideology across than they do about actually telling a good story. The tipping point is the point at which the importance of the messaging outweighs the importance of the story, and a piece of entertainment becomes, for lack of a better word, woke. But if that's the case, then how exactly do we define where that tipping point is?
In theory, woke could be left wing or right wing. Look at the red pillars, okay? They have this sort of ideology, wake up from the modern world. They are an example of people pushing what I would consider red pill wokeness on people. It hasn't really made it into culture so much, into movies. But trust me, if they were the ones in power, they would do the same exact thing. It's about taking the control of power at any cost, and power corrupts. Look at people like Hassan. There's a lot of examples on the left of that. Why aren't there as many as right? Because they've sort of been knocked down for now. Plenty of examples of preachers in the 90s advocating for laws and rules. Hell, the whole Hays Code was a whole moral panic and sort of the Red Scare. That was the more right-leaning people using their authority to sort of stamp out the people on their opposite end of the spectrum. But there can be a midpoint. Despite me disagreeing with censorship in a lot of forms, some of the creativity that came out of the Hays Code with filmmaking created some of the most creative artistic ventures. Think about Hitchcock working under that. How he used symbolism to sort of subvert the rules of the Hays Code. But that a story for another day.
Well, this is where a bit of nuance and common sense has to come into play. And yeah, maybe a drunken arsehole from Scotland isn't your best guide for this kind of stuff, but unfortunately, I'm the only person available to me right now, so here we go. As our first little example, let's consider the theme of representation. We live in a diverse world where you can walk down the average street in any big city, and you'll likely see people of every race, colour, and creed passing you by. So naturally, it makes sense that that kind of diversity should be represented in our entertainment. If, for example, you're writing a story.
See, this is where I disagree completely. Okay, because of my personal perspective, you have an audience. Okay, you want to represent your audience accurately. Okay, most of the problems that come with wokeness is what people perceive as wokeness is trying to add categories on. You can see it in the most infamous, The Last Jedi. Even happened in The Force Awakens. You started with a female protagonist, pretty much a audience insert, self-admitted from J.J. Abrams. You see some of his backroom dealings, and definitely clear that when freaking Finn, Ray, and who was with them? I think that was just those two at that time. When you go into the cockpit of the Millennial Falcon, and when Han Solo steps back in, that's what the audience is supposed to feel. Not about storytelling. It's about trying to give the audience a certain feeling. And frankly, I don't think that's bad, but when it comes at the expense of actual good storytelling, like pretty much wanting the audience insert a Ray to become a Mary Sue because you want the audience insert to be all powerful and to be a power fantasy for the audience to go through. So you had it right from the start in there.
Story set in modern day New York or London or Paris, then it makes absolute sense to have a diverse cast that reflects the diversity of those places. In short, diversity is a simple.
I agree. If you're in a certain setting, you want to reflect a real life location. And a fantasy setting, this is what the disconnect in some things with diversity with that weren't set up with diversity in mind has a sort of disconnect with fans of those properties, like a black elf and Rings of Power. You know what? I wouldn't have actually had much of a problem with the black elf if there was more black elves. But the one black elf just stood out like this guy is just not like the others. Why? Okay, they don't explain. They don't explain in the Rings of Power why there's just this one black elf there. Now, if they had other black elves or they explain he came from another, maybe I missed it, another clan, the dark elves, that's a way to work that in, but they did not put any of the work to sort of create that sort of cognitive dissonance that people like me, who, we have a particular angle for that. And race swap is a very tricky subject to do. I could advocate for some race swaps, but others, yeah, I'm sorry about the whole Cleopatra thing. In that one great race swap debate, I was ill-informed for that particular thing and not well versed on my history. But you shouldn't assume anything about anyone and be open to new information when it comes in.
Concept is not woke. On the other hand, if your story happens to be set in medieval England and you try to work in that same level of modern day metropolitan diversity, then you're probably going to run into problems because your story no longer reflects the reality of the place it's set. You're trying to bend reality around what you wish it could be rather than what it is, and people can see through that pretty quickly. It's the same.
You probably wish it could be more seen through. I don't think it's being seen through more quickly. Maybe on a subconscious level, could be happening, but definitely some people will pick up on it and they'll get labeled as racist for noticing it. That is a shame and disappointment.
Deal if your story happens to be set in a small town in modern day Norway or Russia or the Shetland Islands, isolated places where the population is like 99% white. That's not an inherently good or a bad.
Yeah, but if you haven't been to those places or have no concept of the population, it won't bother you. Yeah, it's better to err on the safe side, but there's There are ways to go about it. I'm just Steelman in the other side. For this, I overall agree with the critical drinker's take on this. Better to err on that someone has the knowledge and will find issues with it in these circumstances, other than try to rewrite history, which seems to be something a lot of people on the far left do. Not saying the far right actually wouldn't do it if they had the power. They definitely would. I see them both as problems. It's just a matter of who has the power in culture and politics at any given time. And I think it's obvious who holds the power where right at the moment.
Bad thing. It's just the reality of living in those places. And if you try to misrepresent them to fit with a preconceived notion that every single place and time has to be as diverse as downtown Los Angeles, then you're setting yourself up for a fall. The BBC is particularly bad for this kind of thing, where their diversity and inclusion quotas get applied to absolutely everything they make, regardless of whether or not it makes a lick of sense.
Yep, I agree. I mean, Doctor Who was a little odd, but I think they did it right when they first came out. I think they're going a bit crazy now. The whole female doctor thing. You had the old white guy, the black autistic guy, and yeah, she was a woman of color who was a police officer. Really, it seemed like a checklist for that ensemble cast when Doctor Who first came out with the 13th Doctor. Definitely had a weird effect. How much of an effect on the story it has? Probably could have not had an effect on the story, but it did. Also, the horrible writing of Chris Chibnall, but let me not get into that. That isn't entirely connected to the woke problem. That's connected to idiot problem, I think.
Or how about female characters? I mean, historically, women haven't been all that well represented in movies, TV, and video games. Yeah, there's definitely been examples of awesome female characters from almost every decade of entertainment, but there's also been plenty of lazy stereotypes of overly emotional damsels in distress, incompetent, empty-headed bimbos, and overly sexualized fantasy figures.
Yes, but also the audience perspective. One thing I will agree with, the general consensus of more left-leaning, well, not even left-leaning people, more media-aware people, is you have to know who you're writing for. That's the basic rule of writing. Who is your audience? And again, these Hollywood films trying to include everyone, trying to get new demographics. Again, the new Star Wars sequel is just a perfect example of that. It's just too great of an example. You'll never find a better example, because even if people want to deny that there was a lot of issues with it based on definitely a little bit of capitalistic, a little bit of ideology thrown in there. It's just like the breeding ground for all this stuff. There might be other examples, but nothing as politically viable and culturally viable as those three movies. Perfect case study for this sort of stuff. No wonder people still focus on it. And why Disney, who's took in the geek properties, which keep in mind, why even listen to him? Good point. He has a unique perspective, at least in this video.
Needless to say, those ideas are dated and unrealistic. And the thing is, recent decades have seen a change in those attitudes, with more and more stories presenting women as strong, capable, empowered, and complex. Great stuff, and a well-deserved rebalancing of the scales. In short, having strong female characters in your stories isn't woke. Unfortunately, the problems began around 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it starts going off the rails a little bit. I mean, I guess it's good to bring this up. The Me Too movement definitely did have an influence on the culture. Just like sort of the Blizzard sex scandals had an influence on sort of games media more than Gamergate already did.
Years ago, when a certain executive named Harvey and all of his misdeeds came to light. And from then on, the reaction from Hollywood was basically panicked overcompensation. Women couldn't just be strong and smart anymore. They had to literally be the strongest and smartest people in every situation.
See, he's wrong. He's just dead wrong here. It started way before then. This just probably hyper accelerated it.
They couldn't just hold their own against men. They had to dominate them physically and intellectually. They couldn't just be determined and resilient. They had to be cold, callous, condescending, and closed off. They couldn't work hard to overcome flaws and weaknesses because they weren't allowed to have any in the first place, and so they stopped learning and growing as characters. Not only were they no longer objectified, but even the barest hint of sensuality had to be mercilessly stamped down and destroyed.
This is a broad scale generalization, and for the most part, I could agree. In a lot of the media, at least he consumes, Disney, Marvel, a lot of the corporate crap there. That's how that goes.
Destroyed to avoid the dreaded male gaze. Again, the tipping point comes when you take a good initial idea and overdo it to the point where it compromises your story and characters. Having strong, complex, flawed, and relatable female characters in your story is great, but bombarding the audience with a relentless series of flawless, idealized...
To push back, you've never seen much of this within the males either. Okay, the action hero craze that Critical Drinker loves so much. A lot of those people were pretty much Gary Stews. I mean, what flaws did the last action hero is bad. Arnold Schwarzenegger character, or a lot of these other people have within their sort of movies. So he sort of has a huge blind spot given his particular bias.
Overpowered, unlikable girl bosses who easily dominate and overpower the weak, incompetent men in their path, but who also somehow still live under the oppressive shadow of the patriarchy isn't. It's lazy, simplistic pandering, and it doesn't impress anyone. And for another example, let's consider the depiction of LGBT people, something that's had a very...
Yes, there are actually ways. Well, untrained is actually complete bullshit. There are ways to make combat completely believable. Berserk did an excellent job of making Casca believable warrior and giving her a certain weakness that came out just in the right moment. Right in Berserk, have your issues with it. That one scene where Casca was having her time of the month and her technique for taking down men with a slender rapier going for the joints in their armor is how you do a strong character. There's probably other examples, but Casca is one of the best examples. And probably a lot of people had issues with her being broken down later in the series, but everyone was broken down. Guts lost eye and arm, had to get that replaced. Griffin basically was forced into an infantile state and took the power choice. And Casca definitely got the blunt of that crappy scene at the end of the second arc of Berserk.
Checkered history and entertainment, although you'd be surprised how many movies actually managed to work in gay characters all the way back to the 1930s and beyond, either hinted at in subtext or just straight up shown for what it was. I mean, really, what do you think Marlene Dietrich was trying to say about herself here? Anyway, the point once again is that simply having LGBT characters and relationships featured prominently in your story doesn't make it woke in the slightest. They're just facets of human life that can make for interesting stories like any other. What does create problems, though, is the lazy practice of taking established characters and retconning their sexuality to make them gay after the fact, even though they've been depicted as straight for years or even decades by that point. The comic book industry's done it.
Yeah, there are ways to actually do that. Do they take the time or effort to do it? No. Generally, from what I see, those retcons, they don't take the time and effort. They don't want to do certain things, put in the work to actually make those things work. And they can't even follow through properly, in my personal opinion, as someone who's studied a lot of different arts, at least from a technical perspective.
To such a degree that it's practically a meme by now, but it's also creeping into movies and TV shows at an alarming rate.
Okay, Casca's not a fair comparison. She's a well-written character first. Okay, fair enough. She is a well-written character from the very get-go. Believable strengths, weaknesses, and yeah, she pushes back her femininity, her female aspects, her aspirations to the background to serve Griffith. But okay, I guess maybe it's not a fair comparison, but still a great character who happens to be a female.
Like how Star Trek Beyond decided to show Sulu, a historically straight character, meeting up with his husband for some shore leave. Damn, even George Takei, who's openly gay himself, thought that decision was nothing but bullshit pandering, and he was right. Another trend in modern entertainment is the way gay relationships are only ever depicted in the most positive and idealized way possible. Like, how many stories and TV shows have you seen recently where heterosexual relationships are either non-existent or depicted as dysfunctional, loveless, toxic, or breaking down entirely, whereas gay relationships are almost universally framed as stories of true love and understanding between two wonderful people triumphing against.
Yeah, they're not trying to give a certain negative representation, but that comes back to sort of the punching down argument of comedy. Because Dave Chappelle, with his sort of sticks and stones and The Closer, criticism punching down on the trans. And I don't agree with it. The perspective is, once you're accepted, truly accepted in society, you can be made fun of. But you know what? The progressive stack is strong. Okay. And you know what? When you don't want to defy certain orders, there's definitely, the checklist is definitely a problem in Hollywood. But this is why alternative market is definitely something that is more viable, especially in the information age. You should respect Casca because she's great, not because she screams at you all over Reddit posts. You should just. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Against the odds. That sort of stuff's great and all, but if that's the only aspect of relationships that you ever show, then it creates yet another restriction on your ability to tell a compelling and nuanced story. You're locked into one specific path that denies.
Yeah, I didn't actually watch that Buzz Lightyear with that one kiss. Maybe it was cringe, but I don't know why people harped on it so much. I don't have the context for it. Maybe it really did feel weird. Gives what they did with Buzz Lightyear. Okay. Just pointing out some of the stupidity I see in the anti-woke movement.
The reality and complexity of real life, substituting it for an idealized fantasy world where nothing gay can ever be bad. Putting any group up on a pedestal is just as damaging to your storytelling ability as demonizing them is. Now, the reason I've spent so long trying to clarify all this stuff is because I can see a bit of a problem looming on the horizon here. Now that more and more people are pushing back against wokeness in entertainment, I think we're in danger of swinging too far in the opposite direction, turning a well-justified backlash.
Yeah. I totally agree with this message of the critical drinker here. That is my concern. The pendulum swing from the left to the hard right. And you can see it. But you can also see the pushback, which is good to see. I guess maybe the centrists or those more moderate left and right can come together to push out the streams on both sides. I can have hope. You know, at least have a respect for the media and a lot of other things.
Into a mindless witch hunt, seeing wokeness around every corner and trashing things that were made with only good intentions. Just because a new project happens to have a diverse cast, or some gay characters, or women in prominent roles, or explores some progressive political ideas, doesn't automatically make it woke. If it did, then people would still be trashing Star Trek The Next Generation to this very day. What really matters is how...
He's absolutely right. Star Trek The Generation definitely dealt with a lot of issues. It was framed, well, it wasn't always good, but had the best of both worlds. You have different diverse aliens and a lot of complex moral issues. I really respect what that show did with the significance. It's probably a tad overrated and overhyped. But I can see where it was good, it was really good. And where it was bad, it was just groaning.
All of this stuff is implemented, the intention behind it, how well it integrates into the narrative, whether it enhances and complements or undermines your investment in the story. That's what's actually important to any piece of entertainment. And if you start dismissing and shitting on stuff simply for what it contains, rather than...
I disagree with that. Different pieces of media have different goals. And why I don't agree political ideology should be pushed on the audience. It can at least be represented within the characters themselves fairly. Okay, there's different purposes. A traditional film, pretty much what gets popular. The Joseph Campbell thing, everyone thinks that all these stories have to follow a set framework. The hero's journey, the heroine's journey, a love story. it's a little bit too limited for me to endorse full scale. There are some characters you're going to want to be damaged, unlikable, but they should be set up in that way. And it should have a particular type of audience in mind for those type of things. Audience in mind that a lot of these bigger companies like Disney and even Amazon seems to go for is, this is good. Representation, blah, blah, blah. And I can see some attempts being made, failed attempts, because the structure is flawed fundamentally at the core, and they don't know how to get back to a more sensible idea of what will sell. And they can't just, probably why we're having this retcon thing. People are trying to go back and learn about this, but they're also rewriting them at the same time.
And how it's been put together, then all you're doing is undermining and discrediting legitimate criticism. If you let yourself become the boy who cried woke, then nobody's going to take you seriously when you come to point out genuine problems.
Yeah, personally for video games, a lot of characters are bad. Frankly, I think a lot of these game people should go back to the silent protagonist type, just the game mechanics, having fun with it. If you can't write a good, complex story, you shouldn't even try in gaming. An actual film, that's a little bit tougher to actually, but you're dealing with different audiences with film. Video games, if you can't write a good character, don't try. Make fun mechanics, a fun world, and work out as many bugs before you launch. That is a horrible precedent.
And shortcomings, and the easier it becomes for all of that stuff to start creeping back in again.
I just thought, right, I need to make my opinions clear on this, my position
Yeah.
clear, because it's appropriate to call out things which have just prioritized identity politics over good storytelling or good character development to the point where one undermines the.
Keep an eye on as anyone who's watching this in the future and now. Heels versus babyface and on TV. This is just funny. Oh, sorry. I'm taking a moment to laugh at just the irony of them being here while critical drinkers talking about this.
The other. But the moment you go over the score and you just start screaming woke at everything, you've lost your mind and you're not contributing anything useful to the discussion anymore.
It ruins the conversation completely, where there's no definition for it. And it's like, I feel like when a message or ideology is injected into a story to the point where it damages the story, that's what woke is. Not just the fact
that's my definition.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you want to get immersed in our world? Yeah, well, guess
Had
what?
to do it.
Fucking pronouns!
Well, actually damage the story. Something intentional that has nothing to do with the storytelling and prove it.
Yeah, how did the pronouns damage the story? It damaged his immersion. The game didn't freaking really. Sorry, not gonna harp on that. I already made enough content off of Az and made my stances known. If anyone cares about them,
Really damages the story. Not just there's a girl with purple hair in it. Oh, there's a girl.
Yeah.
No
Reference to maybe bridge some gaps that may have people might think are appearing. It's like I didn't continue playing Alan Wake 2 for the exact problems that Az laid out in his video. Like the efforts to change Alan Wake as an IP have absolutely destroyed it. There's nothing left. I don't even, if someone said to me like, oh, well, can I play just to see how the story ends? Like, that's not a sequel to Alan Wake. That's something else.
Yeah, you can't just have good over the top characters. Like freaking, I liked, what the hell? Borderlands 2, Jack as a villain. Awesome villain. Completely over the top. Not believable at all, but it was fun, fresh. You can have stuff like that in games. And funny enough, watch like half of the Marvels in somewhere. I'm not going to say where, but yeah, I jumped somewhere and I watched like that last half of the Marvels. It reminded me of Borderlands 3, the power stealing, the sort of trying to sacrifice yourself at the end. I found that so funny. I wonder if anyone else is going to make that comparison, or maybe if it's just the last half that reminded me of Borderlands 3.
Also, some weird game that they made.
Yeah.
It's got everything to do with it.
And some
I think you're absolutely right, Jedi. My personal definition of woke is where ideology overwrites character and story.
Yes,
that's my personal definition of woke.
And I think the definition is really important, especially now.
I do, because when I was playing Alan,
see, I'm hoping he's actually genuinely believing this, pretending like that one woman was trans. I mean, good as a good fucked up theory, but total bullshit. There was a trans. No, there's no trans people in Starfield. There's a lot of fucking problems with Starfield you can point out. Trans people, no. You can. There's a place where you can change your body completely. Name, probably pronouns. I didn't go that far into it.
I was playing Alan Wake 2. So, some people are saying, "Oh, it's got a black chick. It's woke." I said, "There's nothing wrong with having a black female lead. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with creating a game with a black female lead. But she's got to be good.
That's it.
She's got to be good. She's got to be competent. She's got to be this, got to be that. The problem with Saga Anderson is Saga Anderson.
She doesn't have to be good. You can have an incompetent female. Look at freaking Night of the Living Dead. Was that woman competent, brave, or anything? No. It depends on your setting. That girl in Night of the Living Dead served her purpose. She was the setup. Her brother died. She freaked out and just kept freaking out. Then they had a black man. He wasn't originally intended to be black. He was just the best man for that role. And this was the 60s. They got him for that role. He was the hero. And he still got shot at the end. Okay. Yeah, everything. This is why you need to consider your audience and the genre you're working in. Not everything needs to be. That being said, everything they say about this Alan Wake character in the face, haven't played myself, haven't seen playthroughs. If everything they're saying is correct, yeah, I will wholeheartedly agree that this character was horribly written, but not necessarily because she was a black woman, just because she was a woman, probably.
Is a legitimate race change character.
Yeah,
so you have an additional element to that. So
make clear, by the way, just make clear to the audience, this isn't an adaptation change. This is she.
Yeah, sorry. Borderlands 3 didn't happen. It was a dream. Oh, God. And also the last Tales of the Borderlands. I saw someone go through it. That seemed like, I have no hope. I want to have hope for the future of media, good media. Doesn't need to be what these guys sort of told out, because they never consider. They have a very particular audience that they focus on. I have a more general approach that you want to tune whatever media you're making, video game, comic book, movie, TV show, for the intended audience. And if it isn't made, and something made for everyone is made for no one, in my personal opinion. There can be exceptions around that rule, but general rule of thumb around that
was white in continuity, and she is now black and has a different
Is there any explanation for that? Or
yes, Sweet Pea Inc. Sweet Baby Inc. Not Sweet Pea. Sweet Baby Inc. This consultation.
Okay, this is where Az is wrong. I mean, he is right, but he's also wrong. If the industry wasn't so fucked as it was, these consultation companies, freaking Naughty Dog, getting Anita Sarkeesian to help them with A Last of Us Part 2 would never happen. They're blaming the wrong people. They're blaming the sort of people trying to make money off of this. They're not blaming the core problems of these industries for what it is. You don't hate the player, hate the game, is my personal perspective on it. Okay.
Company which comes in that will Stunning and Brave will include their own words, make it more inclusive and diverse in an industry that's unfair. That's their own wording, their own verbiage.
Same individuals don't like guys like Angry Joe. We're really
okay. Yeah, I'll agree with that. They go on with that. Here's the other side. I did this on a previous stream. I want to bring it up. The complete and utter brain rot of some of these comments, just reuse material.
Really going to pretend that none of this nonsense has been.
Okay, Starfield doesn't just have pronouns. It has characters that are gay. Correct. And trans. Incorrect there. Okay? You cannot find a single instance of there being a... See, it's Az's invention. There's a trans clone. That is completely utter bullshit that Az sort of put out into the ether, and just people are running with that bullshit narrative. As I said, put a lot of hours into Starfield, and hopefully I'll try to stumble my way onto a really long critique. Probably not Mahler or even Patrice TV level, but stumble into a note with romantic saying it's forced everywhere in the game. No, did you do a calculated search for it? I've seen just as many straight romantics. Is woke propaganda. No, sorry. It's just trying to be equalizing. There are woke elements, but what did we just hear from the big anti-SJW channels? That just because it has gay and trans people doesn't make it woke. And that's just a step going too far that they were talking about there. See, I hate the stupidity of arguments. There's also a lot of arguments over if someone's trans or trap or... Yeah, stupid people. Let them have arguments. Don't take them serious. Laugh at them. That's my personal policy. If you want to argue with them, pretty much knocking your head against the wall. If someone wants some sort of genuine, ambiguous person to be a certain sex or transgender, nothing you can do to help those people. You're just going to frustrate trying. It's sort of the big people I personally think you want to look at for what they're spreading.
Pushing media for years. We're also going to pretend it's always anti-woke people complaining when there's no shortage of evidence featuring leftist weirdos having...
Look at this. It's not just liberals defending the game, it's the conservatives too, blah, blah, blah. An example that Inman endlessly defending Baldur's Gate 3. Even he's getting thrown under the bus. The king of wokeness is trying to have a nuanced stance, which I'll give him some credit for. Baldur's Gate 3 is definitely epic game and storytelling. And he's probably coming up with a cognitive dissonance for not aesthetics. I can guarantee most of these anti-woke channels are controlled opposition. Look at the conspiracy brain of this. Pause this, okay, if you're watching this midstream. Pretend the game isn't... See, when everything's woke, attacked by liberals just to try... That's sort of like a freaking... They do... There's a certain good point is all these anti-woke channels, a lot of conservatives banded behind freaking Hogwarts Legacy. And from what I know, they all use they, them pronouns for all of them. They didn't give you a choice to be he, she even, but they defended them and went after Starfield. It just... And the fact that you're not hard enough on every little thing. It's just a really bad... This is not a big channel. I'm not going to be too harsh against this person because they have very little, but they are a good example of how far can go.
Mental breakdowns over trivial shit. But let me ask you this. Who do you think are burning books, destroying statues, causing riots, forcing sports teams to change their names, forcing companies?
Yeah, using all these other examples. Just... You guys are crybabies. I don't really advocate for someone just doing this shit. Yeah, sorry, friend. 1% of still something. It's a cause for concern. This is not tolerance. This is not a liberal perspective. This is just, it can't exist. This sort of mindset. There's going to be some people like this revenant remnant out there. And I just hope they'll stay at this sort of a small status.
Companies to change the names of dirty rice and pancake syrup, taking kids to drag shows, and grooming kids to have sex change operations against the wishes of the parents. Yeah, I'll take leftists for $500. But brave Marxists, remind me again, which group is the real problem?
And this, as the hero, I can... Like Elden Ring, who opt out the whole thing. Type A and Type B. Yeah, they sort of went with that. Not making any... Okay. Again, calling that game woke, there's a lot of problems. See, trans characters. They are not trans characters. Misinformation just spreads like a disease. Yeah, no clue. Even straight up talking about non-binary babies, and I must have missed that part. Or maybe it's another invention.
It's no surprise that the woke mob is defending Starfield, and it's obvious ESG pandering bullshit.
The whole argument.
Yeah, I'll absolutely agree. I'm fine with all those things. If it's done naturally, you shouldn't force it. I don't think Starfield forces it, but different people have different perspectives. And just for kicks, and because this guy is a complete moron who I hope doesn't get big, because his brain rot is very strong with Tony your Frog King, a very big clown person. I don't take him seriously. I hope his audience doesn't take him seriously. Okay. I can understand why people can find him entertaining, his false bravado, his complete BS. And to be fair, he does try to bring on developing indie comic creators and other probably underrepresented voices. But still, this particular take, yeah, I took this from Alpha Eagle's video. I cut out almost everything Alpha Eagle put because I'm going to put my own commentary on this. Sorry, Alpha Eagle. You can check it out. You might disagree with him. You might agree with him. Calls him out for lies spread about him. I'll generally agree, but taking these clowns seriously is probably a mistake. But in this with a little bit of fun.
You mean the woke comics is stupid because they've been quote unquote woke since I've read comics, right?
I think art in many ways has always been woke. You know,
it's progressive for sure.
See, that last point is about the only thing that I can agree with. Progressive. It hasn't been woke. Okay. Woke is about sort of woke is about identity politics, pushing representative characters, groups, marginalized groups up. Why sort of denigrating is probably bad. Why sort of treating the wording of this I'm being real careful with. Treating sort of the oppressors with the oppression that they deserved, and it playing out in media. It's just a weird cognitive dissonance here.
And so that's the problem now. We got like 40-year-old, 50-year-old men who are like, why is this comic woke? Like, well, because it's representing what's going on. It's for kids. You're just along for the ride. Captain America punch Hitler?
Yes.
It was very woke, yes, for sure.
Yeah, such bullshit. Yes. A white male capitalist working for a very liberal society, America, was woke? No. And the funny thing is, if you wanted to actually go back and looked at the conditions the Nazis were in after, well, should I say the German people as a whole were in after World War I was over, they had severe sanctions placed on them. It made the morale, you could say they were oppressed by other nations and the Jewish banker people. I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying this is how they perceived it. The Jewish bankers were making money where the German people. So, of course, they were scapegoated. That could easily have came from a woke perspective. And frankly, if you look into Marx's writing, he was not exactly a friend of the Jews. And you look at the current market now of leftists with the state of Israel, Palestine, and they seem a bit anti-Semitic. Okay, they make their apologia for it. Yeah, Germany's country was ruined. They had someone powerful to rise against the oppression of the European sanctions, and you had a psychopath who just blamed the rich Jewish bankers. Just lump them all in the category. They were in woke terms, the German people were the oppressed, the true German people, while the Jewish people were their oppressors, and probably the other European nations who put the sanctions. So your woke ideology, if Hitler's and the Nazi Party sort of had its own version of that. Of course, it had that nationalistic perspective that Marxists wouldn't, but it was the seen oppression that caused them to outrage. And that is probably, if you got to a purely woke or identity politics viewpoint, that's what would probably happen wherever it spread. Hopefully, senses would kick in before any tragedy of what the German people did would actually, but there is that potential with identity politics and some of the more hardcore leftists to sort of throw that shit out. Yeah. Put them in camps. If you're not with us, you're against us. I think there was.
Quaker says, to keep it simple, wokeism is a form of postmodernism that also adopts Marxist ideas. It's a form of ideological subversion. Yuri Bezmenov has a lecture about it. Always remember, Marxism is trash. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a pretty good definition of it. Wokeism definitely does come. I calling it postmodernism is incorrect. If you want to say critical theory with elements of postmodernism and Marxist ideas would be better. Not postmodernism. It uses postmodernism to break things down before trying to reinstate a grand narrative based off of the personal perspectives of particular people, like Black people or women. Any of the oppressed, their grand narrative takes sort of precedence over their oppressors. But yeah, this is completely stupid. And I wanted to laugh at the stupidity. And at least Tony agrees with this. This is why I can't take him seriously. You'll switch his opinion on a dime. When you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Personal perspective here.
Exactly. I hate communism, Marxism, socialism, all the isms. Hate them all.
Is realistic to you, but exploring gas.
Oh yeah, I have a little bit more. I probably should end it here. Try to keep these streams a little tight and this is a little long. But this is a case here, which is really funny.
Concerning gene splicing and body modifications. So what events that prove such survival? If you can't answer either of those questions, then this point won't mean anything to anyone.
Exactly. Starfield takes place in the future, so he has to think people expressing themselves in a way that is not traditional gender normed. He has to think that is a phase and won't exist in the year 2030 something. That's insane.
I've already explained why this argument is stupid, so let's move on.
In the future, gene therapy.
Just to let you know, he did not explain. He has some rather bad arguments, Alex, the critic here. But you know what? A for effort.
And genetic modification will have gone so far that not even the most conservative will be able to say that there are two genders. If you think that things are weird now, just wait until they actually figure out.
See, you have someone with the clout of Asmongold sort of making this argument in response to it. I think it's stupid. There should be, depends on the gender or biological sex. Yes, there is bimodal. There is a sort of gray area for they, them exceptions, but it's not something we want to encourage in society, personally. People becoming biologically different or mutated in any way. Let's hope that doesn't happen. The breakdown of the genetic thing. But he might be right, but it's just the fact that with his influence, him saying this is bad.
How DNA works.
Hold on a minute. I don't think that Starfield touches on anything concerning gene splicing and body modification.
Yeah, this is also, you are factually incorrect here. And the alien DNA, this would be gene splicing. So it is so wrong, it's almost funny.
And it stopped you and put this big ass.
See, alien DNA. And you can change your character's face, body, name, and pronoun, I'm guessing. I didn't go that in depth with my enhanced thing. But yeah, let me not harp too hard on this, because freaking hell. What is his definition? Okay, I want to see the Ackman stuff. Maybe I should just go to the Ackman's video. Yeah. Okay, get off of this because the Ackman was complete dumbass also. So I want to hit everyone equally, have everyone hate me because I'm not going to say everyone's stupid. Their perspectives are absolutely something worth in taking consideration, but definitely tactically and a lot of things. Ooh, yeah, like his Sniper Wolf is terrible and needs to be banned. I don't like the advocation of bans and such a bold and brave statement after everyone's come to that conclusion. And this one, he still hasn't taken it down. I haven't actually played it, but I hear that game is a complete garbage from the start. Maybe they'll fix it. Maybe that's his cope with that. Ooh, okay, yeah, it's this video. Let me just get this out there. I had other things to go on in case I wanted to take other directions in this stream. And yeah, still not playing for Rad. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to like the Hackman to think he's more sensible when it comes to this one particular thing, as it's just that freaking stupid. That's making me be like, okay, I think all this is stupid. Ugh. Yeah, maybe I should have quit.
Shit, look at this woke coffee mug I just found. You guys, this world more real
with this kind of stuff, but I think some of it makes it
humor is so lame.
Cowboy hats too, man. Never you're a loser. I don't like ideology in my games now. I almost to swallow them whole. So this
and his arguments are so fucking dumb. Sorry, irritates me that this is the perfect scapegoat for ass to take out with. Okay, I'm trying to get to his woke.
Head dictionary is a synonym for contrived.
Bethesda including pronouns is ridiculous.
Okay, here's his ridiculous fucking definition of woke, which is fucking dumb.
Ridiculously not proportional.
I think so many people have been fighting the culture war online like every day for so long, they've forgotten what woke used to actually mean and why we started using that to describe media.
Yeah, I think Ackman is actually right here. But then he goes on to try to describe it and does a worse job than Critical Drinker. Critical Drinker does at least a passable job. I have some criticism for it, but it serves a decent purpose personally.
Articles and whatever in the first place. You see, woke, at least in my own head dictionary, is a synonym for contrived, deliberately created rather than arising naturally or spontaneously.
See, he's taken the fucking political aspect completely out of woke. Maybe he's just going to insert it, but...
The only difference between woke and contrived is that woke was contrived, but it had some basis in a political ideology. We used to call media woke when it had an observable negative impact on that piece of media. Like when people wrote about Witcher 3 being racist because it didn't have enough black people, that was woke. That was contrived. That was a conclusion to...
No, that is bullshit, okay? That's just someone trying to push people out. Okay? Calling people racist or whatever, homophobic. That's what that is. That is gatekeeping. Shame into gatekeeping. And we have people on the right trying to advocate for gatekeeping now. The same exact thing.
Writer came up with and then implanted into the game artificially. You know, same as when I made that video on Link is gay and Ocarina of Time is actually a gay coming of age story. I've staged...
Don't get me started. I had to defend Angry Joe from Alex the Critic just because Alex the Critic... Okay, maybe I shouldn't punch down. Well, he's actually above me. I'm not that big. But yeah. I mean, there is some understanding that I can sympathize with their perspective, but their arguments are just even worse than mine. And I don't even think my arguments are great. I have concerns of a more broader market than just gaming and media outside, because when you're just stuck looking at one thing, you get blindsided when you look at games and just the observable effect of politics on just gaming or media. You sort of lose focus on how it's affecting culture as a whole. There's a good balance you need to sort of strike with this sort of stuff. And with a certain amount of influence, I'm not going to judge Ackman. I'm just going to call him stupid for proceeding like this.
True to my principles for like 6 years.
Because frankly, a lot of as is sort of a brain dead response, which came across as believable. Plus, fucking when Nexus mod came out, banning that one stupid mod that disabled the they them pronoun, Ackman had a tweet, "This is false." And he got community guideline checked. This is untrue. He got community guideline checked for his stupidity. And
here's on this matter. It's not about politics in the game. It's what politics do you put in the game? How are you trying to weaponize Starfield and the existence of pronouns within it to fit your agenda for your YouTube videos?
See, as much as I want to criticize this is taking a step too far. And again, he put Bosch in this video. You don't think that's going to give the other side ammo? It did, because you're a dumbass. Don't consider fucking the greater media landscape before you just see someone clowning on ads. Does he know about Vosh? Trying to get in tight with Vosh? I don't fucking know. I don't care. Stupid, and definitely gives the other side plausible deniability, Ackman. Such a dumb video. I can't defend it. You can laugh at both sides, though.
On your channel.
I guess this is what they have to do. It's they sell outrage. They sell anger. They want you to be scared, and they want you to be outraged because they profit off of it.
So when people complain about the Star Wars sequels and how that trilogy is woke, it's not because the protagonist is a female. For some people, that's the case. But mostly it's because the movies have contrived writing that takes us out of the film and that feels artificial. Admiral Holdo withholding her plans and information from Poe is contrived.
Stick to your post and follow my orders.
It's actually a literary plot device known as idiot plot. Admiral Holdo is a character born out of contrived, shitty, lazy writing. And this shitty, lazy writing makes The Last Jedi...
See, I completely disagree. That was a purposeful choice of giant Rian Johnson. Because it's not shitty, lazy... Well, it is shitty, lazy, writing. But it's purposely meant to be the opposite of what the audience expects. It's subverting expectations for just the sake of that. Does it go deeper with some sort of woke messaging? That much I won't say. But, you know, when you're just a contrarian who just wants to do the opposite just to fuck with people or just do awesome stuff, definitely a postmodern idea of not caring about a grand narrative and just stringing along, sort of having some good ideas to insert here and here and here and sort of connect them with the looses of threads. That's the problem with The Last Jedi. And there is a certain amount of political bias, even if it isn't explicit, because the insidious thing about something like critical theory and postmodernism is not inherently political. It's just a philosophy that tends to lean in a certain direction. Postmodernism, something a lot of leftist people on the left really consider, which I think is valuable to a certain extent to understand how people look at things. But when they can't factor in the actual reality of it, the sort of modernist perspective, the facts, the rationale, the age of enlightenment with that personal perspective, and come to a sensible mid-ground, that's the problem with something with woke. But yeah,
a worse film. It just so happens that people have made this connection between the sloppy, shitty writing in the sequels and what's been going on at Disney. This is a much more compelling argument for woke ideology inserting into our media. Starfield is not, and calling everything that you don't like woke is the same tactic as calling everyone you don't like racist or fascist or sexist.
Okay, I have to agree with him. It's a very simple view of it and doesn't have really the explicit bias, but it does have the same results. You're supporting it. The woke ideology is actually mimicking all this other stuff with different language. But maybe I should give Ackman a little credit here. He obviously doesn't understand it on an intellectual basis because it's really hard to explain. It just wokeness creates anti-wokeness for wokeness to fight against, and it creates that culture war, that middle ground. I'm coming to believe the best way to fight against wokeness is just to ignore it. Not completely, but don't even like when a child is having a tantrum, you don't acknowledge the wokeness. You don't acknowledge the child. You wait until they calm down and is sensible. Be like, okay, you calm now. You can talk sensibly. Okay. Yeah, you're going to call people racist, sexist. Don't be like, I'm not racist or sexist. Just be like, really? Okay, can we talk about this? Or are you just going to be a big fucking little baby throwing ad homs at me all day? Okay, maybe I'm wrong on that. It just seems like fighting fire with fire.
And here's the kicker, okay?
And
if
Ackman
simply
just
acknowledging
falls into it.
any form of left-wing belief, left-wing ideology, liberal agenda, if the existence of the optional
and wokeness is not liberal. People just go in with this grand narrative that wokeness has anything to do with liberal values is just completely absurd. Sorry, it has to be stated. People need to stop saying liberals are woke. Liberals can be tricked into thinking that wokeness is, or identity politics is, a liberal idea because it has some beneficial things that liberals can go along with. But just because the outcome can be liberal minded does not mean the process which you come to that equality is done with a liberal mindset. As I said, Ackman advocating for a ban of Sniper Wolf isn't a liberal idea. Should she be banned or not? I don't fucking know. I definitely think she should have been much more punished than she was, but what is the right thing? What's the wrong thing? Maybe things should be just more transparent and talked about. But yeah.
well, pronouns is all it takes to make Starfield woke. Then what the fuck does that make Fallout New Vegas?
In Rome, I found a template.
Yeah, this is a whataboutism. Some bullshit here. The arguments are just so horrible. Whataboutism to the core. Just very sad to see.
For a society equal to the challenges of the post-apocalyptic world, a society that could prevent mankind.
Yeah, some bullshit argumentation. I don't want to acknowledge it with anymore, but I just wanted to point out the stupidity of the Ackman after the stupidity of other people. And people might call me stupid for my personal opinion on this. But frankly, I would be willing to argue this. I don't like arguing against straw men or hypothetical arguments. I'd rather have tangible things to argue against and not just straw man my opponent just because I think their ideas are stupid. Marketplace of ideas, I'm a liberal. I have a very centrist framework. Some leftist ideas, sorry, I shouldn't say leftist, more left ideas have merit from the subjective viewpoint, and more modernist ideas rooted in reason, enlightenment, and finding the facts of the matter are better. But everyone's just playing into the power game, the clout game. Who has the most subs? Who can get the most money? Numbers, numbers, numbers. That number game, okay? Get a better weapon to do more damage. I don't like that. So I don't care if it's a popular opinion. I'm just trying to fight wokeness and anti-wokeness at the same time, because that is the best of both worlds. A good, sensible middle, and advocating for making media for the audience. Maybe trying to bring in slowly, not shoehorning in some freaking little romance in the middle of an action series or a video game that is supposed to be fun and free, and try to put social commentary like Borderlands 3 into it. Frankly, all that's sad, and that's all I have to say on that. What is wokeness? Wokeness is sort of identity politics. Well, sorry. It's more rooted in critical theory that's current form has sort of manifest in sort of the progressive stack of identity politics that tries to find whatever angle it can, whatever subjective viewpoint, no matter if you're uh, a someone of a certain minority race, a female, a queer person, wherever, lesbian, gay, guy, transsexual, queer person, gender binary, whatever you want to call yourself, and sort of bounce off of tackle it from all angles, creating a sort of a wave of shit that people have to find, trying to go for that power in the aims of getting that power to expand on that power more. And of course, creating a backlash of people who sort of fight back with the sort of same methodology of doing whatever they can via identity politics themselves or other ideologies to sort of gain power themselves to fight it back against it. Simply put, some ways the only way you can win the game is to simply not play it, or should I say, change the terms which the game is played on. Personal belief of mine, sort of hard to do that without actually getting power. But frankly, my methods are flawed because got no power to sort of make my reality or my perspective really well known. Still something I'm grappling with, but doesn't mean I can't be a little idealistic. Take in people's personal perspective to try to get a greater understanding, but still not dealing with the bullshit that's not based in reality. Thanks for everyone who came and anyone who's watching this in the future. Till next time, I'm done. Bye.